It began with an assignment no one aboard fully understood, a mission wrapped in silence. The men of the USS Indianapolis had become used to secrecy. After years at sea, discretion had become second nature. But this time the air felt heavier. Orders were delivered in short, precise statements. Movements were swift, purposeful, and without the usual chatter. Even the ocean seemed to respond, its surface strangely calm as the ship sliced through the Pacific at high speed. The Indianapolis had weathered storms, combat, and endless patrols since the war began, but now its role was different. The crew didn't know the nature of the cargo locked behind reinforced doors deep inside the ship. Only a small circle of officers had access to the sealed containers, and they treated the mission with the kind of stern seriousness that left the younger sailors exchanging uneasy glances. The ship moved as if chased by shadows, though there was no visible threat on the horizon. Despite the tension, daily routines continued. Men scrubbed the deck, ran maintenance checks, monitored gauges, and performed drills they could do half asleep. Some played cards during breaks, others leaned against railings and gazed across the ocean, letting the wind brush through their hair. There was no land in sight, only the endless blue wrapped around them like an unbroken curtain. Yet beneath the calm surface, unease simmered quietly, an undercurrent felt but not spoken aloud. At night, the ship became an island of moving light. Stars blanketed the sky with impossible clarity, undisturbed by city glow or cloud cover. The air carried a slight chill, refreshing after the daytime heat that clung to the steel structure. Sailors on watch found themselves scanning not just the water, but the skies, searching for anything unusual. They couldn't explain why. They simply felt more alert than usual. Captain Charles McVeigh observed everything from the bridge. He stood tall, hands clasped behind his back, eyes steady as he tracked the ship's path. He knew more than his crew, but less than he wished. Command had briefed him on the stakes, on the importance of speed, on the absolute necessity of silence. But the details remained locked away, even from him, allowing only enough context to understand the weight placed upon his shoulders. He accepted that burden quietly and carried it with unwavering discipline. When the Indianapolis reached its secret destination, the transfer was completed swiftly. No ceremony, no explanations. Crates disappeared from the ship just as quietly as they had arrived. The crew watched from a distance, their curiosity burning but restrained. As soon as the mission was complete, engines roared back to life, pushing the vessel once again into open waters. Yet instead of relief, a strange stillness settled across the ship. The hardest part of their assignment, they believed, was over. But the ocean had other plans. The Pacific stretched endlessly before them, shimmering in the daylight like sheets of glass. Hours passed quietly, marked only by occasional chatter or the metallic rhythm of machinery. The Indianapolis moved alone, unescorted, a single ship in a vast expanse of water. To some sailors, that isolation felt freeing, an uninterrupted horizon, a chance to breathe deeply and enjoy the vastness of nature. To others, it felt unsettling, like being watched by unseen eyes. As the sun began to set, soft orange hues bathed the ship in warm light. Long shadows stretched across the deck. Sailors gathered in small groups, telling stories or sharing jokes that evoked short bursts of laughter. These moments of camaraderie were essential. They reminded the men that even though they sailed into uncertain waters, they were not alone. Every man relied on the others, bound together by trust and necessity. When night descended, it did so abruptly, a curtain of darkness falling over the ocean. The sky turned deep blue, then black, punctured by constellations bright enough to navigate by. The Indianapolis continued forward, engines humming steadily. The ocean was so still it seemed frozen. Not a single wave battered the hull. This unusual calmness made the men uneasy, though few admitted it. The silence of the sea, normally comforting, felt unusually heavy. On the bridge, officers exchanged quiet remarks. The ship's speed was consistent, the course precise, yet something in the night felt shifted. McVeigh sensed it too, though he couldn't pinpoint why. The air tasted different, thicker, as if charged with static. He checked his instruments again, then scanned the horizon with binoculars. Nothing, only darkness. Far below, the radio operator sat in a dim compartment, listening to the hum of static. There were no incoming transmissions, none expected, none allowed unless absolutely necessary. The silence weighed on him more than any noise could. He tapped his fingers against the console absent-mindedly, then stopped, chastising himself for the nervous habit. The ship's isolation, normally just another part of the job, now felt like something else entirely. Around midnight, a sailor on watch paused mid-step. He could have sworn he felt a subtle tremor beneath his feet, not from the engines, but something external, a faint shift in the water. He leaned over the railing, focused on the still surface. Moonlight glimmered faintly across it, but nothing moved. After a moment, he forced a laugh at himself. Fatigue played tricks on the senses. He continued his patrol, though he walked a little faster than before. In the sleeping quarters, hammocks swayed gently as men tried to rest. Some succeeded quickly, exhausted from their shifts. Others lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking of home or trying to unravel the uneasiness sitting like a stone in their stomachs. They chalked it up to the mission's secrecy, the pressure of delivering unknown cargo, or the odd stillness of the ocean. They couldn't imagine the real reason. Beneath the surface, hidden from sight, something moved. Far below the waves, silent and invisible to the men above, a shape glided through the darkness. It tracked the Indianapolis with slow, deliberate intent. The water muffled all sound, turning the ship's engines into distant vibrations. Lights aboard the vessel cast no glow downward. The ocean swallowed everything, yet the presence below moved with purpose, unfamiliar to the sailors who slept mere meters above it. Back on deck, another watchman scanned the dark horizon. He rubbed his eyes, scanning again. The ocean looked empty, but he couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. His instincts had saved him before, guiding him away from danger during earlier patrols. Those instincts stirred now, whispering caution. Still, the night carried on without incident. At least that's how it appeared. Around 2 a.m., a faint shudder rippled through the ship, too soft for most men to feel, but noticeable to those closest to the hull. In the engine room, a mechanic paused, listening intently. But after a few seconds, the noise of machinery returned to the forefront, drowning all else, and he resumed his work. If he thought about it at all, he dismissed it as a normal vibration. On the bridge, McVeigh's attention sharpened. A brief flicker of intuition told him something was shifting, but he had no evidence. Only a captain's instinct, honed by years on the water. He adjusted their course slightly, more out of habit than necessity. Minutes ticked by, slow and steady. The Indianapolis pushed on, then it happened. A sound unlike anything the crew had heard before, deep, powerful, and sudden, shook the ship from bow to stern. The deck vibrated violently as a force slammed into the hull. Men were thrown off balance. Alarms hadn't yet begun to blare, but the instinctive reactions were immediate. Sailors scrambled to their feet, gripping whatever they could grasp as the ship groaned under the strain. The explosion was not theatrical, not a burst of fire and light. It was muted from within, a pressure that ruptured steel and sent shockwaves coursing through the vessel. In the sleeping quarters, men jerked awake, confusion turning instantly into fear. Tools clattered to the floor in the engine room. The radio operator jolted upright as equipment rattled violently. Above deck, a sailor shouted for help, grabbing onto a railing as the ship listed slightly. Darkness swallowed everything. The ocean, moments earlier calm and quiet, now churned with unease. Before anyone could fully process what had happened, a second impact tore through the hull. This one was stronger, clearer, sending vibrations that shook the entire structure. The ship lurched again, tilting more noticeably. Cries echoed across the deck. Shouts for officers, for direction, for answers. But clarity was nowhere to be found. Inside the ship, men attempted to reach their stations, but the corridors were already filling with confusion. Some parts of the ship darkened as power flickered. Others filled with smoke-like haze. Equipment fell from shelves. Metal groaned, strained under pressure. The Indianapolis had been struck. Not everyone knew it immediately, but they all felt it. The sudden shift from calm routine to raw danger. McVeigh barked orders, his voice sharp and steady despite the chaos erupting around him. Sailors moved into action, trying to stabilize the ship, assess the damage, get bearings. But each passing second revealed the truth. The Indianapolis was in trouble, serious trouble, and the ocean outside offered little mercy. In the lower compartments, water rushed in with terrifying speed. Not a violent surge, but a relentless flow that spread rapidly. Men clattered up ladders, their boots slipping on wet surfaces as they struggled to escape rising water. Some compartments sealed automatically, cutting off routes and trapping others behind thick steel doors. Above, the deck tilted slightly more. The angle wasn't dramatic, not yet, but enough to make movement feel awkward, to force men to clutch railings as they navigated their surroundings. The ship's engines sputtered. Then one fell silent. Another attempted to hold on, but the damage was too extensive. McVeigh knew what was happening. He had seconds, not minutes, to think. The ship was sinking, not slowly, not eventually. Now. The tilt of the ship grew more pronounced with each passing breath, turning narrow corridors into steep inclines. Men hurried upward, gripping pipes and railings as the floor seemed to slip out from beneath them. Some moved with practiced discipline, years of training snapping into place without conscious thought. Others were still shaking sleep from their eyes, trying to make sense of the chaos that had erupted so suddenly. The only certainty was the urgency pounding through every heartbeat. The Indianapolis was going down, and it was happening faster than anyone could have imagined. McVeigh issued rapid commands directing officers to assess damage and coordinate evacuation procedures. But the ship was already responding to forces too powerful to counter. It groaned deeply, the sound echoing through every compartment like a final warning. The metallic echo traveled down hallways, through the engine room, into the sleeping quarters, and up to the deck, an unmistakable signal that the ship's structural integrity was slipping away. Below deck, some men found themselves waist-deep in water with barely enough time to react. They shoved one another upward, prioritizing escape over everything else. In those moments, hierarchy dissolved. Rank meant little when water chased you up a ladder one step at a time. Those who reached the next level turned back to pull others up, refusing to leave anyone behind. The ship might be failing, but their sense of loyalty held strong. One sailor pushed upward through a narrow maintenance hatch, only to find a hallway already tilted at a sharp angle. He crawled on hands and knees, using instinct and faint emergency lighting to guide him. Behind him, a friend struggled to climb. He reached back, grabbed the man's wrist, and hauled him out. They didn't exchange words. There was no breath to waste. They just ran. On deck, the situation was no less desperate. The night was still ink black, the stars bright, but the sudden tilt of the ship made even the most familiar sights feel foreign. Sailors scattered across the deck looked around in disbelief as they took in the damage. Smoke seeped from one side of the ship. The deck was angled unnaturally toward the starboard side, forcing every movement to become a careful negotiation between balance and instinct. Some men clung to the nearest stable surface, while others helped direct their teammates toward the railings. McVeigh's voice carried across the deck as he ordered the crew to abandon ship. The words were swallowed by wind and chaos, but the urgency in his tone cut through everything. Men reacted immediately, some jumping overboard without hesitation, others climbing down ropes, some pausing only long enough to steady another sailor before pushing into the water. The ocean below them was calm, disturbingly calm, as if the sea had gone still to watch. Life rafts were released, though many hit the water at angles that caused them to drift away before anyone could reach them. Some inflated, some did not. The darkness made everything more difficult. Men splashed into the water, fighting to stay together despite the confusion. Their cries mingled with the creaking of the ship and the distant calls of those still on board. Inside the ship, there were men who couldn't reach the deck in time. Doors jammed, paths flooded, machinery blocked escape routes. They hammered on sealed metal, hoping someone could hear them. But the noise of the sinking vessel drowned their cries. On the deck, a young sailor froze as he watched the ship tilt further. His legs refused to move, terror locking every muscle. A seasoned officer grabbed him by the collar and shouted something, words lost to the wind, but the intention was clear. Move. Survive. The officer shoved him toward the rail. The sailor stumbled, then forced himself to climb over the edge and jump into the water below. The impact was cold enough to steal breath. The ocean enveloped him completely before he surfaced, gasping. Around him, dozens of men bobbed in their life vests, scattered across the dark water. Some called out names. Others scanned the horizon, hoping to spot a raft or floating debris to cling to. A few tried to swim back toward the ship, unable to process the sinking happening before their eyes. The Indianapolis was listing heavily now, the bow dipping lower as if pulled by an unseen hand. Lights flickered sporadically along the hull. Alarms wailed faintly. The deck tilted again, sending equipment sliding into the ocean. A lifeboat broke free and splashed into the water with a hollow thud. McVeigh remained on the bridge as long as he could, shouting final commands. He knew that a captain often stayed aboard until the end, but he also knew his presence in the water could help guide survivors. When the angle of the deck became impossible to stand upon, he made his choice. He climbed down one level, grabbed a rope, and lowered himself over the side. The moment he hit the water, the cold closed around him like a clenched fist. The ship was going fast, too fast. Some men treaded water, staring in disbelief as the Indianapolis sank lower. A few whispered prayers, others cursed, some simply watched, unable to look away. The vessel that had carried them across oceans, stood through storms, and delivered them into unknown missions, was now slipping beneath the surface with a speed that defied comprehension. The stern lifted upward slowly, rising out of the water as the bow submerged completely. The ship seemed to pause, suspended in an unnatural angle, as if deciding whether to fight or surrender. Then, with a deep groan that reverberated through the ocean, it gave way. The Indianapolis slipped beneath the waves. The glow of its remaining lights vanished as the sea swallowed them whole. The silhouette dissolved into the depths, leaving only ripples and bubbles on the surface. The sound of metal bending under pressure faded gradually until the night became silent again. An eerie, sudden quiet that felt almost cruel after the chaos. Men clung to their life vests, watching the final bubbles rise. Some cried softly, tears indistinguishable from the ocean spray. Others looked around, trying to find familiar faces in the dark. The moonlight provided only a faint silver outline across the water. They were surrounded by a vast emptiness. Minutes blurred into each other as survivors drifted in small groups. Their bodies trembled from the cold. Their breaths came in shallow gasps. Some called out to one another across the dark surface, trying to keep their group together. Others whispered encouragement, reminding themselves, and those close by, that help would come. They believed the Navy would notice the ship's absence quickly. They believed rescue was already being organized. What they didn't know was that no distress signal had been sent. No one on shore knew the Indianapolis had been lost. No one expected it to be missing. The men were alone, floating in the dark water, their legs dangling into the depths. They waited. The ocean around them looked endless. They kicked gently to stay afloat, careful not to waste energy. Some pulled themselves closer to any debris that could provide extra support. Others formed small clusters, linking arms or joining life vests together to keep themselves from drifting apart. They spoke quietly at first, voices trembling. Some talked about home. Others tried to recall survival techniques. A few attempted humor, trying to lift spirits. But exhaustion soon stole their breath, and silence crept in. The sounds of the ocean, gentle waves, soft splashes, became their new reality. Hours passed, though none of them knew how many. The night sky eventually began to lighten, a pale gray dawning on the horizon. With the faint glow of morning came the harsh realization of the situation. Now they could see each other, faces pale, eyes wide, bodies cold. They could see just how many men were scattered across the water, separated by currents and distance. They could see how small they were against the vastness of the ocean. The sun climbed slowly, bringing a false sense of comfort. While the light warmed their faces, it also revealed the condition of their surroundings. Some men clung to debris or life vests that were already showing signs of wear. Others struggled to stay afloat, their limbs heavy. The salt water burned their skin. Thirst crept in quickly, a dry ache that deepened with every passing moment. They scanned the sky for planes. They scanned the horizon for ships. Nothing. As daylight strengthened, the sea around them shimmered. Shadows shifted beneath the surface, though none knew what caused them. The survivors remained aware, their instincts forcing them to stay alert even as fatigue pulled at their muscles. One sailor pointed towards something floating in the distance. A group began slowly paddling toward it using their hands. It turned out to be a damaged raft, barely holding together, but enough to support a few men. They helped each other climb onto it, making space for the weakest among them. Another group found a crate filled with empty containers that could be linked together for flotation. They gathered it carefully, securing it as best as they could. It gave them hope, a small, fragile hope, but hope nonetheless. But as the sun climbed higher and the heat intensified, hope battled exhaustion. By midday, the temperature soared. The ocean around them reflected sunlight so intensely that many survivors had to squint or close their eyes. Their skin burned, their lips cracked, their throats tightened with thirst. Some spoke less frequently, conserving strength. Others drifted in and out of awareness, voices growing faint. They waited. They prayed. They had no idea that help was still far from coming. And as the afternoon shadows shifted, something moved beneath them, quietly, almost imperceptibly, reminding the men of a truth they had hoped to forget. They were not alone in the water.